Hey, it's Mazzy, and it's time to talk about mobile fidelity again and audiophile pressings. There seems to be this ongoing debate and left and right. It's kind of like what's happening in America with the blue states and red states of digital versus analog. And I think we need to kind of come together a little bit and not everything has to be black or white, and not all digital is bad, and not all analog is great, especially with older tapes. And I got inspired to do this video because I got requested to do videos like this by some people. Some people get turned off when you're jumping into the audiophile realm somewhat, which is really unfortunate. I mean, there's room for everything, all kinds of music, all kinds of record releases, all price points, and some people see the value in some of these records, and some definitely don't. And a fire has been lit again this week because of this controversy, somewhat with ERC Doors' debut mono record. I do not have it. I did not order it, and I don't have any, and I've never heard an ERC record. It's this one-man operation, small operation at least, in the UK, all tube system, and they do these very limited runs. In this case, the first Doors album, mono Doors record, about 450 copies. It sells for about $375 US out the door, maybe 450. People's head explode when you call it a $500 album. All is said and done, it's between 400 and 500. It's still a friggin' lot of money for a record. And the controversy has escalated because, to begin with, the mono tapes of the first Doors album are not in good shape. There's distortion. There's a lot of problems with that tape from 1967. I have an original Monarch Doors mono, and as great as it sounds in a certain way, it's a vintage sounding record. It's not a great sounding record, and in my opinion, the stereo is better. I like the stereo. I like the stereo of all those Doors albums. I think that's the time, even though 68 was really the time when stereo was really pushing forward. 67 is that kind of, crossroads in a way. And it just seems to me the wrong record to make at one of these limited pressed handmade editions. My original 67 mono Doors album sounded great on the stereo I had in 1967 and 1968. On modern gear, that record doesn't sound so great. I'm here to showcase a dozen mobile fidelity records that sound better than original copies or early copies, in my opinion, one man's opinion. Now, some of these have DSD digital steps, some of them do not. I am not an all-in label person when it comes to audiophile records. I have about 50 mobile fidelity LPs, which is a lot, most of which I like. The ones that I don't like, for the most part, I've gotten rid of over the years. And again, I don't subscribe to that thing that you have to buy everything that a certain label puts out. Now, having said that, I have no one-steps. I'm not a fan of the boxes from Mobile Fidelity and that Clarity vinyl or their special Doodah vinyl. Like I'm not a fan most of the time of the UHQR that Analog Productions puts out. Having said that, I have 4 of those. So whether these records are all analog or they have a DSD step, I think what it comes down to is the mastering, and it comes down to, in this case, most of these LPs were mastered by Craig Wunderlich, and I personally like his mastering style and his sound. Some people feel mobile fidelities are bass heavy. Back in the olden days, in the 80s and into the 90s, the smiley face EQ. I'm not all in on one label or another, but I wanted to talk about these records because, remember, it's also not just your taste, it's what your room sounds like. In a way, that's the most important part of all this, is your room. My room tends to be a little bright, as you know, my main room upstairs. It's in a living space that's not room treated. My ears and my brain are tuned to my room over the years. So again, all this is subjective. You're gonna like these, you're not gonna like these, and it really doesn't matter. But I thought I would show these dozen records. But as I frequently do, I'm cheating a little bit here. There's more than a dozen. There are a dozen artists. In some cases, I pulled several copies, mobile fidelity versions by an artist, just to kind of illustrate how I feel about these records. Now, I do want to start out with one I did not like. One of my all-time favorite records is from 1967, and it's this Young Rascals record, Groovin'. Every track on this is great. It's soulful, it's a little psychedelic at times, great pop. It's a masterpiece as far as I'm concerned. And they use the mono tapes for this, the mono edition. And I don't like the mono. I have an original mono, I have reissues, I have Rhino stereos, I have all different versions of this record. And the stereo is the one to go. My guess is that Mobile Fidelity wasn't able to get the license for the stereo. So I think this is weak because I think the mono is weak. Do I blame Mobile Fidelity and their EQing choices? To me, I just don't like the mono mix of this record, and I don't think it improves at all for Mobile Fidelity on this version. But it is a fantastic record, and I suggest find a stereo version of this, whatever version you get. So I kind of wanted to show that. And one that I did not include too, and is a fantastic record, is this Elvis Costello Burt Bach record. This is an amazing sounding record. Now, I think this is the only vinyl version up till now, but this is being reissued in the next month. So it'll be interesting to see. Again, I don't usually do comparisons and shootouts, so I probably won't dive into that, although there's a version with extra cuts that sort of piqued my interest. But this is a wonderful sounding record, and I only could compare it to the compact disc I got when it came out. And this, of course, kicks ass over the compact disc. So again, DSD steps in here, but great mastering choices and a wonderful, wonderful sounding record. So again, these are not in order, but I want to go through the collection, just talk a little about what I like about these. Okay, my 12 favorite Mobile Fidelity albums, artists, that I feel are better than original pressings. I'm going to start with Miles Davis. I have almost all the Miles Davis Mobile Fidelity records, and I think in almost every case, they better the originals. I think Kinda Blue is the one example of one Mobile Fidelity record that is weaker. I have it. I don't suggest you go for that. If you really want audiophile pressing, in that case, the Analog Productions version, I have a 33 of that, is much better. It's more on the EQ choices. It's not that it's a digital step involved. I don't think that matters. And this whole debate between digital and analog, it all depends. I mean, there's room, obviously, for digital in the realm of recreating some of these records and old tapes, including that ERC Doors record. I think it really needs digital help, and I think the Why Don't We Please version had a DSD step in it, and that might have improved that version. Again, I haven't heard that version. But I wanted to show Bitches Brew. This is one of my favorite albums. I do have an original 2i. This is the year, the last year, I believe 2i's were around in 1970 when this came out. And this record, this version is fuller, there's more bottom. Now, some people consider Mobile Fidelity to be bass heavy. I don't think that's the case. If your rig is set up right, if your room is right, it all, again, it's system dependent, your ears, your taste. This kills it as a Mobile Fidelity. This is a 33 version, which I'm, thank goodness it is. I think they are doing a one step of it, but again, I don't go for the one steps. To me, this is the sweet spot. Now, $60 for a double record for some people is a lot of money. I totally get that. But for the quality of the package, for the quality of the pressing, for this particular thing, I think that's really a bargain for this type of record, for this particular record. And then there is what is my favorite Miles Davis record, In a Silent Way. This is a fantastic record, which is 1969, I believe. And again, Krieg Wunderlich mastered this and did a fabulous job. I like it better than the original. I have an original of this, and I have a later 70s pressing in this. Again, this is fuller, it's richer, it's more balanced. I think it, the originals are somewhat thin, especially compared to this. Now, if you're not comparing records, maybe it doesn't matter. If you like what you have, all the power to you. If it's the next artist that I'm going to add to this that I think are better than the originals is Bob Dylan. Now, In some of the cases, it's an unfair comparison because it's 45 RPM. A lot of people don't like 45 RPM. I'm not a huge fan of 45 RPM. There's a great mono box that's going up in price, but I will say this album, this is a super vinyl version. This wasn't cheap. This was, I think, $70, a double record, and 45 RPM. But the original of this never sounded good. I remember the day when it came out. I literally opened the box of 25 or 30 Columbia records in the record store we put it on. There was something about it that disappointed me, sound-wise, even back then, especially 2 years after Blood on the Tracks, which is probably one of Bob Dylan's best-sounding records. This opens up with the great song Hurricane, and there's a thinness and there's like a blanket over the original version. And there was an SACD version that improved it somewhat, I don't know, 15 years ago or so. But this is the first version that sounds really good on vinyl. So I highly recommend this, better than the original. The other one I want to use as an example is The Times They Are A-Changin'. This is one of my favorite Dylan albums, of the later acoustic, one of the last-ish acoustic records. I just love this. I think, the song, obviously the title track, is this great anthemic, wonderful piece of music. Now, this is double 45 RPM. Some people are turned off by that. That's why I have my originals and I have the mono box, because sometimes you want the flow to happen, and I can totally understand being turned off of certain audiophile records when they go for the 45 RPM when the original is a 33. It does add some things, and depending on your rig and your ears and your sound, but this is the mono version of this, and this is sublime. The imaging is magnificent. The acoustic guitars just are beautiful on this. And I'd say one of my favorite acoustic guitar-wise is Pat Garrett and Billy the Kid. The sounds of the guitars on that, although I will say that is one where I think it's very, very close and not much better, if at all, than the original Columbia version. Just the guitars have a sheen on that and a beauty on that that almost any other Dylan record has. And obviously it's a 70s recording, which, helps it, I guess, in certain ways. And there's those instrumental passages with great, acoustic guitar sounds. It just makes it just a really beautiful listen. And I can understand that some people, I don't want to get these because they have a DSD step, a digital step. But if you're making your decision on just that, I think it's my point of view, and I'm not dissing on anyone or pissing on anyone here, is that you're not listening to the music and the record and the sound of it. You don't hear digital artifacts here. You don't know it's digital. We didn't know these were digital until we found out they're digital. This is wonderful. Again, it's the mastering. Digital does, sometimes help things. Would we love an all analog version? We have analog versions, but even with those all analog versions, there's something about the mastering choices on this that I think are better than those originals and that mono box. Now, then someone will say, well, what if MoFi had done all analog versions with their mastering choices, Maslov? Would you like it better? Maybe, but this is what I got, and I enjoy it. And I think their covers are premium covers. I like this a lot. So this represents the whole Dylan catalog. There are some I like better than others. On the whole, is every Dylan album better? A lot of them are. But again, I think I had to include these in my top 12 MoFi records that are better than the originals. Next, I'm going to throw out this Beck album, Sea Change, produced by Niall Godrich, a very favorite of mine. Of course, the moodiness of this album, the Serge Gainsbourg influenced sound, just, one of the best breakup albums, but sounds better than the original. This is a time when CDs were king, and the original is a little thinner, and this is really fuller. This is spread over 2 records, and it is a wonderful sounding record. So Beck's Sea Change, again, Krieg did an excellent job on this, and I think this should be in every collection. Unfortunately, it hasn't been repressed. Probably the licensing is gone, but it's one of my very, very best sounding Mobile Fidelity records. One of my best sounding records, no matter what the label. David Crosby's If I Can Only Remember My Name has always been one of my favorite albums. I got my copy in '71, and my original copy still sounds fantastic. And It is a wonderfully recorded record of Wally Heider's in San Francisco with members of all the, the bands of the time, from the Airplane to the Dead to Neil Young. Just a fantastic mix of a little kind of soulful psychedelic with country elements and layers of multi a cappella vocal stylings and that kind of great guitar work of Neil Young and the Airplane people and Grace Slick. I just love this record. MoFi did this as double 45, and it is an amazing sound and record. As good as the original is, this kicks ass over the original. Again, beautiful record, If I Can Only Remember My Name by David Crosby. And again, slightly better than the original. I don't do a lot of shootouts on my channel, but last year I did a shootout when the anniversary edition of Waiting for Columbus came out. There was a box set, a CD, and a vinyl edition. I got that edition. I got the, I think it's the Bernie Grundman, Chris Bellman edition that came out. And this is the 1979 edition. They did this twice. At 79, I believe they did it in the late 80s, early 90s. I don't like that version. I have heard the other MoFi version, but this is a wonderful version. This is a great sounding album. And in that shootout, this won for me, but not by a lot. All three sounded amazing. The original, my original Warner Brothers sounds great. The Bernie Grundman sounds really good, but this just, there was something about the edge. I was told I was wrong, literally to my face. This is a great sounding record. Again, any of these in this case would be fine, but the 1979 version, Waiting Columbus, one of the best sounding live albums of all time. Again, it's always about the music, but you want to be able to crank this mother because this is a great sounding record. The bass, the drums, just, Lowell George's wonderful vocals and slide guitar on this. Fantastic record, crank it and play it. But again, in this case, all them are very, very close. So, but I like having this one, and I have all three. So that's one of the few times that I'm going to keep all three because you just never know. I have an original, I think it's a yellow label version of on Epic Records of Jeff Beck, Truth. Rod Stewart's on several of the tracks and vocals. What a wonderful record this is. The original record is thin, and I never expected this record to sound that great. When I heard this was coming out on Old Fidelity, I kind of questioned it myself. I always thought, really, do I need to get that? And, did FOMO kick in? Maybe a little bit, but I'm sure glad it did because this sounds far superior than the original. This has a fuller sound. It's more natural. I think the original has a little edge to it that I don't really enjoy myself. I enjoyed the record much more. I mean, as much as, I've had this record for 50 plus years, and I always liked it, but it wasn't one I would grab to because even though, again, it's always about the music, right, Maslow? I want my records to sound as good as possible, and for some reason there was a harshness on that. I felt, at least, and this changed it all. This is well balanced. It's not bass heavy, but it's got a great neutral sound that really works well, at least on my set. And those of you who don't know, I have a live room again. I have BMW 702s, S3 speakers, which are considered bright, but I have a Hagel H390 amp that pushes them, that actually made my speakers sound so different than the Rotel I had previous to that. I have a Riga RP 8 turntable with a Hanna ML MC cartridge, and these records track beautifully. I'm pretty happy, and I've been pretty lucky with pressings on my MoFi. I think I've had one bad MoFi ever, and that I had to exchange. Next is Procol Harum's The Salty Dog. This is one that really took me by surprise sound-wise because I know this record inside and out. I bought the original on A&M Records, the American. I do not have a UK Fly, but I have the A&M with the gold brown label. That sounds really good. This is more of a moody record at some point compared to some of their others after Broken Barricades and before. And if you only know Procol Harum's A Wider Shade of Pale, you're in a treat. This is a beautiful record. You got Gary Brooker, of course, on piano, and that great vocal. You know, his voice, very soulful, a blue-eyed soul voice. Got Matthew Fisher and the great, classic organ sound of Procol Harum. Got B.J. Wilson. His drumming is, I think he's totally underrated on his drumming. And of course, Robin Trower, the great lead guitar player. But there's a mood to this record. This is a 33 Mobile Fidelity record. This is one that is amongst my very favorite of my Mobile Fidelity. And again, maybe because it's such a surprise, as much as I like the sound of this record, there was always, the A&M record was great, little noisy, but, even from day one, this is sublime, it's quiet, it's beautiful. It has a depth to it that the original doesn't have, I think. And I think this is out of print, but if you can find this and pick it up, if you don't know this record, you should at least find an original A&M copy, because, it's not like this, is tenfold better than the original, but it's really good. Of course, it's a quiet copy, and it just fills in this mid-range that and some of the bass too that gets lost in the original somewhat. But crankable it is, and just amazing vocalizing and musicianship. Just a great sounding record, Mobile Fidelity version of Procol Harum's Salty Dog. These are two records that really transformed. These are two of my all-time favorite records. I've said many times my favorite San Francisco psychedelic band is Jefferson Airplane. And of course, 1967, one of the great records of 1967, The Summer of Love. You can include this with The Doors and Sgt. Pepper. And, aside from Sgt. Pepper, these records weren't really well recorded. Jefferson Airplane, a lot of these studios didn't know how to record rock and roll bands. Jefferson Airplane goes to RCA Studios again for their second time. They did the folk rock album, their Jefferson Airplane Takes Off, and they go with the help of Jerry Garcia as a consultant in a way to LA. And a lot of the engineers really didn't know how to mic and to record rock bands. Of course, for 50 plus years, I've been loving Surrealistic Pillow. Great record, great sounding record, great psychedelic record. I do usually prefer the stereo. I have the stereo in mono. I think Sundays put out a reissue of the mono. But there's a certain drenched reverb sound and a sound, even though it's great, I'm not going to take it away from the music, because again, it's the music that matters. This version transformed this record and made it the best version. I didn't think this record could sound as good. This is a double 45, which, again, some people don't like the flipping of it, but this is the mono version, and this is a crankable record. This just adds something that I've never heard in this record before. And literally, I've heard this record hundreds of times. I know this album like, the back of my hand, or the person, woman, man, all the things, the clarity, the mental acuity of me knowing this music here. What a great record. An all-time favorite of mine, probably the best of the San Francisco, psychedelic bands. This is the best one. It made my list, and one of my, check that video out, my top psychedelic 60s albums, and this was number one, and it still is. Even though we've heard it so much, how many times can you hear Somebody to Love and White Rabbit? But the MoFi kicks ass over any other edition. And in this same frame, I'm going to show this record, because this record isn't loved or known by as many people, but this is a gorgeous record. I think, this is very, very close. I mean, people like Crown of Creation. They love Bathing at Baxter's. I hope MoFi would do Bathing at Baxter. I think that's one they really need to do, because that is their most adventurous, like, what the F record. But there's a greatness to this record. It's political, it's charged, the vocals, the guitar playing. Yorma's cover on here of Good Shepherd, that traditional song, is a wonderful folk song. Of course, We Can Be Together and Volunteers are these politically anthems of the 1969, right in there. Nicky Hopkins piano playing. It sounds much better than on the original. Again, 45 RPM, Volunteers of America. Wooden Ships, their version of it, came out around the same year. I believe it's Crosby, Stills and Nash, because Paul Kantner was a co-author of that with with David Crosby. I mean, what a fantastic record. And again, this is where Mobile Fidelity really, hit it at the park, really succeeded with these two Jefferson Airplane albums. So I hope, if you're listening, MoFi, bring me to the mastering session if you ever do Bathing at Baxter's. I want you to do After Bathing at Baxter's. And I bet you other people do too. Moving on. What a wonderful record. Los Lobos, I think Los Lobos is probably one of the best last bands standing continuously. Maybe in the very beginning they changed a member, but I think they had the same lineup they've had for all these years. They were on Slash Records from East LA, Latin, just great, fantastic records. Some in Spanish, some in, a mix of English. They're a great jam band live. They do cover stuff as well as their own. But this is a wonderful record co-produced by Mitchell Froom and Los Lobos. And this is Kiko. And this is a record that sounds fantastic. And I do have the original Slash Warner Brothers record. And this eats it for breakfast. This is a wonderful sounding record, Los Lobos. Next, I'm showing 3 records in my promise of keeping it to a dozen artists. And of course, my all-time favorite guitar player is Ry Cooder. And they only have done these 3 records. They did SACD versions of Boomer Story, which was his 3rd album. And I just love this record. This is probably his most really kind of organic folk blues country record. A little political in terms of the Woody Guthrie feel to it and the acoustic guitars, and it sounds amazing. Of course, his instrumental version on here of Dark End of the Streets is sublime. You got Paradise and Lunch and Chicken Skin Music, one of his great co-authored original songs on here, Tattler, that Linda Ronstadt covered. These are 2 perfect albums. I'd say, bang for your buck, these are his 2 best records of him, not including the records he's done with all his collaborations with Indian musicians and Cuban musicians, and the array of world music and other artists that Ry Cooder has produced and brought to us. I mean, this guy is a national treasure, definitely. But these 2 Mobile Fidelity records, I mean, the original Warner Brothers sound good. If you have those, they sound great. But there is an extra something, especially if you know this music. What was interesting to me is when I was reading these comments about these ERC Doors records, there were several people, and this is what surprised me. Now, to each his own, you do what you do with your own money, and I'm never going to criticize someone for, you paid $400 or whatever for an album. If you got the money and you want to buy it, that's up to you. That's your thing. But I read several comments of people, I'd never heard this entire Doors album. I know Light My Fire, so I went for the ERC. Really? That's where you're starting? I just think that's a little odd, personally. But who am I to say? Are you buying it as an investment? I don't know. And someone's going to say I'm criticizing them for that. But that seems an odd place to start. Like with this, if I didn't know this record, I mean, at least I'd stream it and get to know if I like it even, and then go for the Mobile Fidelity if you can. But again, I think these are good deals for the quality and what you're getting in the pressing. Again, DSD step, I think, on this one too, on the Ry Cooders, but you don't hear any kind of digital artifacts, and they sound fantastic. And if you like a record, if you have a favorite record, this is where these type of pressings, I think that's the audience, if you're in love with a record. But I have never been one that I have to get every MoFi that comes out. I have to get every one step. I told you, I don't buy the one steps. I don't have to buy an entire catalog just because it is that. Same with like MoFi doing these Van Halen records or these Eagles records, to buy the whole thing. Now, if you're a fan of Van Halen or the Eagles and that's one of your favorite bands, I get that. That's different. But just to buy them because they sound good, I think from my point of view, that's the wrong reason. You buy records and Mobile Fidelity records or analog production records or intervention records. When you're going for an audiophile pressing, my opinion, again, you buy it because you love the music. You love that record. Next, another sharing of 2 records by one artist. And again, I love these records. And, the original pressings are good and they sound pretty good, but this upped it. Nielsen's, Nielsen Schmielsen and Son of Schmielsen, two really great records, sound better than the originals. What more can I say? Lastly, I want to showcase this album. I think this was just repressed, and this is Bill Withers' greatest hits. I've had it for I think a year now. And a comp. Sometimes comps are harder to get right because sometimes tape sources and things. And that's probably a good example where DSD comes in. You can kind of level things together. Now again, I'm not an engineer. I don't know how that works exactly, but my guess is it's harder when you're putting comps together in all analog to get everything to kind of match for the comp. Now, I will say I just got a copy of this that I'm selling from this collection that I acquired of the original Columbia version of this record. And I put it through the Humming Guru, and it sounds fantastic. It is very close to this. This has a slide edge, but if you have that original Bill Withers record, and it's a clean copy of this record, you probably don't need this record. Now, I didn't have that. I haven't seen it in a long time. I suppose if I had gotten that record and I wasn't going to sell it, I would keep that, and I probably wouldn't have got this. But I think this is reasonable price for what it is. I think this is a fantastic, first of all, the music's great. This is, what a great comp. Bill Withers, his greatest hits, his best of. It's so good, and it sounds amazing. Another great sounding Mumble Fidelity in my collection. But again, that original is, you know, it could go either way, and it probably, again, depended on your system and your ears and your taste. So this is one that, again, as much as it stands out, this is a good recording to begin with, and that original Columbia sounds fantastic. So I hope this gives you a little idea. I want to have fun with this, and, you know, if you're not into going the audio file route, that's fine. Just buy the music you like and then find the pressing you like. And I know it's not always easy to audition, and some of these are getting pricey, but I think the one good thing about all this MoFi stuff, I think things have leveled off, and there's not this mad grab to buy something before you even had a chance to think about it, to listen possibly to it, or to find out if you want to invest in these records in your collection. But this limited thing where you have to, like, within 10 seconds make a decision, it's not really a good way to buy records from my point of view. But I love these in my collection. These are ones I'm keeping. You know, the Young Rascals, we'll see. You know, I wish they'd done the stereo on that. That's one I don't like. There are others I have that I didn't like the Inagata Vita that much. Some people like that a lot. I did not love the MoFi one, and I have an original, and I think I have a Rhino version of that, which it's not the greatest, again, recording to begin with, but I didn't hear a big improvement there. Vanilla Fudge, a little bit, but again, that one too didn't bowl me over and didn't blow me away like some of these. So again, it's pick and choose this stuff. You know, pick and choose, see what you like, and enjoy the music. As he loves you. See you next time.